Okay, time for another movie review. This is A Child is Waiting. It was released in 1963. It's directed by John Cassavetes. The screenwriter story by Abby Mann. Cinematographer Joseph Lachelle. Editors Gene Fowler Jr., Robert Jones, and the music by Ernest Gold. The cast: in the lead role, Dr. Matthew Clark is played by Burt, Lancaster. Gene Hansen, a teacher, is played by Judy, Garland. And Gina Rowlands plays Sophie Widdicombe Benham. She's the mother of the young boy, which is the central theme of the movie. Stephen Hill plays the boy's father, Ted, and Bruce Ritchie plays Reuben, the young boy. Gloria McKennicky is another teacher. She plays Mattie. And Lawrence Turney plays Sophie's new husband, Douglas Benham. And finally, we've got Elizabeth Wilson, who plays Miss Fogarty. The movie was directed by Stanley Kramer. The background to this: John Cassavetes, it was his second feature as a director. He was responsible for the really awesome Late Blues. Well, I found it awesome. It's told in a cinema verite semi-documentary style, but the film ran into trouble with Cassavetes' attempt to bring his unconventional improvised style to the shoot, which were at odds with the producer Stanley Kramer in regard to beliefs, etc., and didn't go over too well with Garland or Lancaster, who weren't comfortable with his unconventional approach. Things came to a head during the final editing, and an argument ensued, and Kramer fired Cassavetes and finished the film himself with the editor Gene Fowler. It has to be said that the final cut was probably far more soft than what Jack Cassavetes had in mind, and Cassavetes was quoted as saying, "I didn't think his film," referring to Kramer, "was that bad. Just a lot more sentimental than mine," which just about sums up what John Cassavetes was all about. Now, in my attempts to try and get the review as such to be a little bit more on the fly, my notes, it has to be said, are much more praise-seed. So let's get going. Throughout the years, anyway, Hollywood has frequently been attracted to stories of human endeavour, pain, survival, and splendour, illustrated in writing set in institutions, schools, hospitals, and prisons. And we can recall some of the gems prior to this release: Blackboard Jungle in Urban School, Berman of Alcatraz Prison, and I Want to Live, which also had an element of prison life to the final cut. And there are also other movies where characters have been receiving some form of psychiatric care, albeit briefly. And I won't bore you with a long list. Now to A Child is Waiting. This is a school, a very special school for children and teenagers deemed defective by the doctors and psychologists. It's based on this script by Abby Mann, who I referred to as being involved in Judgment of Nuremberg. And Burt Lancaster is a psychologist, Dr. Matthew Clark, and he's the director of the Crawthorne Mental Hospital. One of Lancaster's own children apparently was a troubled child, and he had a very strong personal interest in this subject matter. Judy Garland, she gives a very sincere performance as the do-gooder, inexperienced teacher who believes love is all that's needed for these vulnerable children. And then there's Bruce Ritchie, who plays the child Reuben. And he was really the only child actor in this film. All the other children were in fact patients at a Pacific State Hospital in California. Anyway, the film focuses on the so-called retarded child Reuben. 2 years after arriving at the facility, the newly hired teacher, Gene Hansen, played by Garland, arrives. She's an ex-pianist, and she's searching really for meaning in her life. and she's touched by the 12-year-old Reuben's craving for attention and becomes drawn to the child. The child's mum, Sophie Widdicombe, excellently played by Gina Rowlands, recently remarried to a lawyer, Lawrence Teeny, never visits the child, and we witness flashbacks to Reuben's infancy with his parents and the impact on them when the child is assessed and deemed to require institutional care. Clark, however, is concerned about Hanson's attention to Reuben and believes that her desire to get the mother to restart visiting could have a detrimental impact on the child Reuben. His experiences of rejection before suggesting that further turmoil emotionally could occur if the parent visits out of guilt. Now, Reuben's parents, early care and then testing that proved decisive that he was retarded is shown, and his father's anger and disappointment at finding out that his son isn't normal drives him to a point where he becomes very reckless in the car when he's taking Reuben to the institution. However, the language that's used in the film reflects the language that was used to describe youngsters and adults who had psychiatric problems. We use the words defective, mental, handicapped, and Cassavetes explores briefly the therapy introduced by Clark with regard to drawing and painting to help the child relate feelings that they can't articulate. I'm very familiar with this technique as I used it in my work with sexually abused children. Treatment within these facilities in the 60s was a fairly radical development, and the message by the director, I sense, was to reduce the effect of institutional damage. Early on, we witnessed the craving for attention by the kids, particularly Reuben, when Hanson arrives at the school. Lancaster, well, he's a mixture of sensitivity and strict boundaries, which he's convinced is important to teach communal rules. His handling of parents who are hanging on to some slim hope for their retarded child rang some bells with me in terms of my profession. Although to staff, of course, he utters lines like, "We should treat the parents, not their kids." Another reminder for me, really, of what it was like in social services. Lancaster runs a tight regime, charismatic but not keen on delegation with respect to liaison with family or government management. We see Harris irritated by those responsible for funding, who are lacking insight as to what one can hope to realistically achieve with these youngsters in this institution. How is success measured? It prompts you to think. We see Clark's tempered disdain for parallels made with value for money, example, infrastructure investment. He's clearly a man committed about his work and its benefits in terms of human compassion. The final segment focuses on Hanson's decision to ignore Clark's views on not contacting the mother, and the consequent visit, and it's a guilt-ridden visit, ends disastrously for all, including the boy who runs away in a futile attempt to find his parents, who leave abruptly. Clark retrieves the boy from the police station, and the final film then shifts to a more positive outcome as Hanson is persuaded to stay and gets involved in song, music and drama, which engages the children actively, resulting in a play presented to the parents. I sense that this was Kramer's editing after Cassavetes was fired. One can only speculate as to how Cassavetes would have shown the ending. The movie does leave us though with some questions, one being, who is more valuable to society, the dishwasher or the soldier or the salesman? And shouldn't society try to nourish and maximise the potential of all, even those with learning difficulties, as they feel emotion just the same as a successful performer? We come full circle into the closing scene, a new arrival, but this time Clark delegates Hanson to greet and make the young child feel wanted. Clearly both Clark and Hanson have learned from the experience with Reuben. Once again, an impressive character portrayal by Lancaster is a standout here, and Garland exceptional as well. Of course, these two were involved in Judgment from Nuremberg, the movie previously a script for the script writer. And just a quick nod about Rowlands, who became a very popular actress in Cassavetes' scripts, and she's excellent here. So I suggest you get to watch this movie. It's probably not been seen by many, but I think it's an excellent watch. A Child is Waiting, 1963, produced by Stanley Kramer and directed by John Cassavetes, and a little bit of Stanley